Hey, it's Arvid, and this is the Bootstrap Founder. If you had asked me a couple of years ago if I loved coding and software development, I probably would have given you a resounding yes at that time. No other job had ever been as enjoyable to me. There hasn't been any other activity that has ever been as rewarding as building software and writing code and building systems that do what I want them to do in ways that other people couldn't. But if you ask me now, and I just realized this very recently, I think I have a much more nuanced perspective. And it comes from two places, really. Having been a software entrepreneur and developer for well over 2 decades at this point, that is one of them. And having experienced the fundamental change that is software engineering with AI assistance, right? The stuff that has only been happening for a couple of years. Quick word from our sponsor, paddle.com. I use them as my merchant of record for all my projects. And if you really want to make sure that you can only focus on your product, you don't have to focus on financial regulators and banks, check out paddle.com as your payment provider. Let me dive into what I recently realized. I never really loved coding. I just always thought I did. I thought I loved coding because that's what I could do. That's my skill. And what I was able to do very effectively was build these software products. So that was kind of my contribution to the market. It felt like it was the thing for me to do, and nothing else ever came close. It was my superpower, my identity at some point, and it was a craft that I had figured out pretty well. But now that I've been dabbling at first and then later like establishing a pretty solid workflow with AI assistance, I'm realizing that the coding part was never actually the thing. Like watching an AI agent solve my problems much faster, much more comprehensively than I ever have, well, that's given me this completely new perspective on what coding actually means to me. Because in the past, I never really had a choice, right? Either I figured it out or I didn't. Either I made the machine do the thing that I wanted it to do or I didn't. And anything that I couldn't figure out was impossible for me to solve. The act of composing text into lines of code and then deploying these lines and testing each individual line and building this strong mental model of the whole code base in my mind and then implementing it in a text editor, all of this stuff that makes coding possible was inseparable from the outcome to me. But now we're using AI systems to build things for us. And suddenly the act of writing this code is not required anymore, not in the traditional sense, at least. I'm not hiring somebody else to do my code. I'm hiring a machine to execute the code implementation function. And I'm realizing this particularly with my current project, Podscan, because Podscan started out as a 100% coded by me kind of project. It was all on me. I used it to learn Laravel and to build a scaling system and work with transcription stuff. All of this I had to figure it out. And I had a blast building the first prototype, building the first couple stages of the tool. Everything was handcrafted, every line considered, and every design pattern, both in the visual sense and in the architectural sense, was quite deliberate from the start. And then, over time, AI-assisted coding happened. I started copying, pasting modules and functions into things like OpenAI and Anthropic systems. Claude was a big thing that helped me from the start, and had them optimize the code and have them give me feedback on how to do things better and more effective. And just about like 6 or 7 months ago, I started diving into agentic coding, like having AI tools build code for me. And I've never looked back, because right now, whenever code is added to the Podscan system, it usually originates from me prompting an AI and then doing a massive code review on that. I write tests to ensure that the rest of the functionality is not impacted by these changes. And I have the AI system write tests that work just like the ones that I have written. And what I'm noticing with this particular kind of tooling is quite profound. I seem to enjoy the orchestration of code, like putting it all together, looking at it, making sure it's right. But I never truly enjoyed the construction of it. And maybe this is the big differentiator between a software developer and a software entrepreneur. because I've always considered in the past that each software developer is just this one choice away from operating their own software business, right? They already have the technical skill. Now they just need to turn it into a business. But I'm realizing now, both from making that shift myself and from having a couple decades of experience working with other software developers, that some people are just wired differently. Some people enjoy not the solution of the problem, but solving the problem. It's like the journey, not the destination for them, that a hardcore software developer truly enjoys. And once that is solved, there might be a fleeting moment of pride and enjoyment, but the next challenge is immediately tackled because it is about the journey, not about getting to where the journey leads you. And for an entrepreneur, I think that's a different story. Each feature, each implementation, everything we build into our products is just a pivot towards more success, like a hopeful pivot towards more success, or a mistake that then has to be rectified and reverted. Right? It's never the most rewarding thing to build a feature. The rewarding part is if it makes the business more performant, if it makes you more money, if it attracts more customers, and if it retains more customers. That's kind of the goal state you want to be in. So a pure logic thinker, a person who really loves coming up with a technical solution to a technical problem, well, they don't want to have to think about business. They don't want to have to think about the customer-facing impact of their logic, of their algorithms. They just want to have a highly efficient solution to a mathematical puzzle. And as much as I enjoyed solving these puzzles in the past, I'm realizing that my ultimate goal was never related to the puzzle in the first place. It was always very much concerned with whatever the puzzle was surrounded by, this operational framework that the puzzle happened in, which in my cases either was somebody else's business that I was part of or my own business that I was trying to build. So for a lot of software entrepreneurs who come from a background of crafting really high quality software, this transition to agentic systems that write good code on a good day and mediocre code on a bad day, it feels to them like they're losing this point of pride. You're losing some sort of your identity as somebody who's been building really good things well for many years, often even decades at this point. And it brings to mind what I've been reading on Twitter for quite a while around the tweets of Jack Ellis, the co-founder of Fathom Analytics, because he's been very outspoken on his feed about his failed experiments with AI systems. He was trying to maintain the quality of the code base or add features to their quite high throughput, high performance software suite, which Fathom is, right? It's kind of a much better Google Analytics replacement, that I can say for sure, because I'm using it. So a lot of people have chimed in on those tweets and agreed that their initial contact with AI coding has been almost explosively negative, structurally defeating, because the tools were just not up to scratch and they wasted time having AI build something that they wouldn't want in their code base. These tools were not creating code as the original author, the person who was prior to that, were doing it all by himself or themselves, would have wanted it to be. And I think that's the difference. I look at my work with Podscan and it's been working out every single day for like half a year to have an AI system do it for me. And I don't think that I'm a significantly better prompter or that my configuration of my agents is any better. I think both Jack and I were using the same tools and we're both capable of clearly expressing what we need, what we want the thing to build. So if it's not in the inputs and it's not in the tools, then it must be in the verification step. It must be in what I allow to be the right code, in quotes, or what my code reviewing process does not flag as a problem. Because I'm quite liberal when it comes to patterns in my code that I may not have implemented myself, but I understand. When I look at the code suggestions that Claude or other tools give me, occasionally there are things in there that they use that I would never have used. But then I try to figure it out. Instead of saying no, because I know better, it's like, but why did you choose this? Like, why are they being used? I engage the system in a conversation. And either it's explained to me well and I agree with it, or I then iterate on it to find something better, something that I understand better. And that being said, I don't necessarily tell Claude or Codex or whatever I'm using to implement it exactly as I want it implemented. I don't like tell it what to code. I just tell it to find an alternative that might resonate better with what is already in the code base. Like, remember that Podscan itself was initially constructed from my own patterns that I wanted. So to just have it be more aligned with the existing patterns is often a good hint to put in your system prompt or to put into your individual prompts to make sure that the pattern wilderness doesn't just explode here. Not it's like the Cambrian explosion of different patterns. If you already have some in your code base, these tools are pretty good at comprehending them and then using similar patterns. So I'm quite flexible in accepting that the first implementation of something, provided it actually works, which is important, has to be some kind of solution that I will allow into the code base as long as I fully understand it and have had this conversation with the developer, which in this case is an AI system. And I talk about feasibility, alternative approaches enough for my taste. So I don't really look at the specific code. I try to understand it, and then I look at my comprehension of that. And if that is sufficient, then I allow it in, which is, I think, something that code reviewing always has been doing. Code reviewers have always been doing this. But I think now, since we are trying to adopt a mental model that was created by something that is not a human, that we couldn't have taught our patterns, we have to kind of figure out how to interact with this to similar quality outputs, but in a different way. I think our expectations for what good code means are always and have always been wildly different between developers, and what acceptable code in a code base and a pull request is as well is also affected by this. I think I've always been quite flexible there. So if it does the job, then I'm good with that. And I've never been so committed to creating the perfect software implementation of a feature that I would dismiss a non-ideal variant of it, a preliminary version that works well enough but may not be perfectly crafted. And I think this might be the perspective you need to have to use these tools, particularly in early stage software businesses where velocity and shipping speed and flexibility are more important than having pristine code, something that I believe is only pristine for a while anyway, because there are always optimizations to be made. Things always change. You can always find ways to improve things. So having code that is perfect, it's kind of only perfect until you decide it's not. And my threshold for deciding that things are not good enough is pretty high. So something needs to be really, really bad for me to call it not good enough for now. So I'm just always trying to go for like an 80-20 approach here and see if we can get things to a quality level that I can comprehend and that works reliably because there are tests in the system to make sure it does. And then that is perfect. It might be a little bit more resource intense, but I'm not Cloudflare, right? I'm not a massive service that is trying to serve every single customer in the world with like sub-microsecond optimizations. I can deal with this if my metrics show me that there's a performance problem at some point. I don't need to do this from the beginning. So what I'm trying to say is that just like choosing, I don't know, a new continuous integration chain because it's a little bit more effective or a lot more effective, or porting part of your system to a new, more performant programming language, or choosing a new vendor for a higher performance database system for stuff, making some kind of incremental improvement of your business, allowing yourself to let go of the notion that you have to love coding it yourself, have to love the act of writing code. Well, I think that's one of these incremental changes in your entrepreneurial career. You have to allow yourself to say, nah, this is good enough. It might not be exactly how I would done it in 4 hours, but it was just done for me in 5 minutes. The trade-off, a little bit of technical debt, maybe, a little bit of complexity, but I now can do 20 times the things that I need to do, or I can do my work on the side business in a 20th of the time and spend more time making money to finance it, or building something else. Like there are these kind of little balance choices that we have to make as founders, and I think giving up the notion that you have to love the act of writing code is one of them. It's a choice you are allowed to make. No developer will look at you funny. Well, people will, but no developer that understands the benefits of this will ever. So I think we've all figured out that we interface with AI systems very effectively anyway in other places, right? When it comes to writing emails, or when it comes to having the AI play devil's advocate for like a customer service message that you want to send to a customer, but you want to see how could they react. We all know that these tools are really good at helping us with that. And they can be very persuasive when set to solving a particular problem. So the last question for many software entrepreneurs is having these tools touch their code bases right now. People hesitate a lot. I get that. It's a big change for them, a hard change to deal with, because it's about letting go of this self-assigned identity that you're only a true programmer if you program, if you write lines of code into an editor. But I think there's something else to consider here, particularly if you're on the entrepreneurial path. Because eventually, once your business becomes bigger, it grows, you're going to have to delegate development anyway. Somebody's going to have to write code differently from you because you're going to hire them and you're going to tell them what to build. And it's not going to be you. You're not going to hire a clone. So they have a different approach. It's just now that every single one of us has access to that somebody else for $20 a month. When we use Claude or OpenAI's Codex or Gemini or whatever it might be, I think it hits us earlier as developers now that the delegated parties that are writing code for us, that we instruct to write code for us, aren't writing code as we would. It's something that we are not prepared for because we're not trained to hire. We're not trained to lead or delegate as software developers. At least not everybody is. So having this much earlier with these AI systems is a change we have to embrace. In fact, you can learn how to lead another developer by interfacing with AI alone. And once you do, all of a sudden, the shipping velocity and the feature agility that we have in building software businesses is just massively bigger. And I think that is quite the advantage. I wonder if there will be more and more and better tooling to help developers who have these extremely high standards about crafting code to get to the level of quality that they want anytime soon. I would certainly hope so, because the benefits from building from this orchestrator's perspective compared to typing every single thing into your IDE is so massively outweighing the drawbacks for me right now that it would be very hard for me to get back to actually coding as I did 2 years ago. It would slow down my experimental speed that I have. So if you find yourself experimenting with these tools, and if you find yourself questioning whether your diehard approach to handcrafted software is a relic of the past, or if it should be a hill you're willing to die on, maybe consider that it really has a lot to do not with what the job to be done is while you're writing this piece of software, but what the goal of the surrounding system is. Are you building this because you enjoy building? Are you building this with the ulterior purpose of facilitating somebody else's job, helping people be more efficient, helping people waste less time? Is this kind of a self-centered activity, or is this an externally driven activity? And for many people, understanding this difference and then applying a transition is a shaky process filled with disappointment, because tools need to be talked to in a certain way that we have not yet developed an educational system around. But I hope people allow themselves not to be trapped in this perfect coder mindset anymore. Because what I've discovered is that I feel the same level of enjoyment, if not more, from looking at generated code, making sure it works and making sure it implements the features that I want in a way I find appealing, than I would have gotten from actually writing the code myself. It turns out it's not that I love coding. What I actually love is getting code written and getting code deployed, getting it deployed quickly and getting it into the hands of users who can benefit from it. And if AI can help me do that faster and with less personal strain, well, I don't think it's a loss of identity for me. It's just an evolution towards what I think I was always meant to be. Not a coder, but an entrepreneur who happens to know how to code. The code was never the point, but the business always was. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to The Bootstrap Founder. You can find me on Twitter at Avidkahl, AIVIDKAHL. And if you want to find critical conversations about your brand, check out Podscan.fm. We monitor over 4 million podcasts in real time. We will alert you when things are mentioned, and we turn this unstructured podcast chatter into competitive intelligence. If you're looking for your next venture, you can discover validated problems straight from the market at ideas.podscan.fm, where we identify these startup opportunities directly from conversations that people have, so you can build what people are already asking for. So share this with anyone who needs to turn conversations into competitive advantage. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day, and bye-bye.